Warp drive, Mr. Scott.
At the start of the last chapter, chapter 15, I said that it was my goal that by the end of the chapter I would have the nacelles completely assembled and mounted to the tops of the pylons on the ship. And now, chapter 16, here we are towards achieving that goal. I actually took a couple of vacation days this week, took 2 days off, a Thursday and a Friday, so that I essentially had 4 days to work towards completing the nacelles and get them mounted. I've spent the last 3 days working on this, and again, here we are. But I am just about to get the nacelles completely constructed and put together. As I said in chapter 15, you build this ship at its own pace, not yours. There are a lot of things that once you get into them, you discover it's just going to take longer than you expected, and sometimes your outcomes are not exactly what you aimed for, and you have to decide how to overcome obstacles or just do a little bit of a better job. There's a number of little things that have slowed down the process. These little pieces right here, which I believe are the bussard collectors, which go on the forward part of the nacelles, spent far longer than I had anticipated, and they're relatively little simple pieces. They're just 3 different colors, but I just could not get the color blue that I wanted for this cross T portion, which also connects and extends into this line here. So I painted and repainted them. Finally got the color and intensity of blue that I wanted. Was just about, yesterday afternoon, was just about to start assembling everything and realized I completely forgot about these pieces that connect to the bussard, then go to the tops of the nacelles. Had to halt everything and mask them and paint them up. On some light tests, I discovered that I had some hot spots running along the top of this chiller grill. You had to sort of get at a lower angle and look up to see those hot spots, but since this ship is probably going to be mounted up on a shelf, I would certainly see them. So I had to think about what it would take to mitigate those. I made thin little beads of the Gorilla Grip wall putty and packed in here along the top of the chiller grill where it actually connects to the inside of the nacelle housing and the nacelle piece. Packed it in, and a test showed that those hot spots were completely knocked out. So yay. Had a little bit of frustration in mounting this blue LED strip light. I used hot glue, which I'm just not that much of a fan of. It's a pretty good hot glue gun. I paid a pretty good amount of money for it, but still it's just so imprecise, and the glue flows out faster than I want. I did manage to get the piece put down, but for the starboard side, I actually just used the Gorilla Grip putty just to pack it all in. I just like using that putty so much. You can put in as little or as much as you want. It goes down cold, it presses into place, and it just hangs on forever. So again, at this point, I have got all the different components for the nacelles ready to be assembled together. I did notice on a lighting test that these bussards, which I mentioned, which go right here in the forward portion, that there were some light leaks coming through right here and right here on the edge, and so what I'm going to do is pack in a little bit of the wall putty here in the corners to really tamp out those light leaks. So the next step is to get everything ready and assemble the pieces. I'm going to have to run the power lines into right here, but not glue the RCS thrusters fins in place yet, because once I have the body halves together for the nacelles, that's when I'll actually put together, sort of like a jigsaw puzzle, the pieces for the end caps, which are these long fins which wrap around from the lower section and then go up across the back of the nacelles, and then they're capped with these photo etch pieces right here. So I'll have to have the wires in place for the RCS thrusters, again through this hole, but not glued in. Once the glue has cured on the body halves together, then I can do the final assembly on putting together, again, these interlocking pieces, and then I will glue the RCS thrusters in place. So I'm strategizing every little component of this to make sure when it all goes together it is done right the first time, and then we'll let it cure, and then we'll take a look at the final paint assembly for the final paint process for the tops of the nacelles along the seam. Let's get started. It's possible to get a really good practical floodlighting effect from this lighting port here on the front cap of the outside portion of the nacelles by placing 3mm bulbs. I had really great results on my first build, and I have actually already set the one for the starboard side. This is the port side nacelle, and I want to show how I did that. Once again, as I have used so many times throughout this build for setting lights and securing wiring runs, this is the Gorilla Grip wall putty, and I put a little dollop there, and the little port, the hole is right here. So I've got a 3mm bulb LED, and what I do is place it kind of loosely, and the Gorilla Grip putty basically is just holding it loosely in place. And now I am going to temporarily attach this nacelle to the pylon, and from there, when I've wired, once again temporarily wired this light in place to the connector, and I get light coming out of it, I will be able to move the light around and to focus it on the front portion of the secondary hull where the registry pennant goes. So let me show you how I achieved that practical lighting effect. So with the starboard side interior nacelle piece temporarily affixed at the top of the pylon, I can take the 3mm LED, put it in place so that the bulb is shining out through the hole at the front of the nacelle cap, and as you can see, move it around and position it so it is striking where the insignia and the registry marking will be. From here I will take the Gorilla Grip putty and pack it into place, and then give it another test to make sure that it's still striking that spot. So with this test, the 3mm spotlight is hitting exactly where that registry marking and insignia is going to go. So I will just pack in a little bit more of the Gorilla Grip putty, then hit it with a little bit of canopy glue, and then the starboard side will be ready, and then we move on to the port nacelle and its spotlights. Well, the cells are together and ready for mounting. You can take a look here to see how I clamped everything together while the tester's styrene glue cured. Once it had fully cured for about 6 or so hours, came back in and then had to take care of the seam line and a really fine purple light leak coming from the chiller grill lighting that came up through here. Did some really fine sanding, and then and then masking, of course, and then just some fine, thin coats of white, followed up by Tamiya semi-gloss and mostly knocked out. There's a little bit of the seam line that's still showing through, but in my experience from my first build, the Aztec decaling obscures a lot of that. I didn't want to, I could probably do more and I could probably completely eradicate this line, but I really am worried about manhandling these pieces too much with all the wiring and lighting components in it. I just don't want to do anything that could affect those. Also, talking about handling these pieces, you have to use a lot of care when holding and turning the pieces around and around in your hands. With the chiller grills, it would be the easiest thing to, when handling, take your thumb and without really paying attention, pop in the chiller grills. And after these things have been assembled, well, there's not enough swear words in all of the languages across known Federation space that really would illustrate the stress and the anger and the frustration that would come from making a mistake like that. So use a lot of care when handling these and do everything you can not to put fingers or thumbs right here on these chiller grills, because they could potentially pop in. Once I had the seam lines taken care of and I did a little bit of puttying and spot painting to get rid of some light leaks, there's a little bit of a blue glow again from the chiller lighting that was coming through these forward bustards. So I went in and did some fine application of tulip with paintbrushes. Then I went ahead and did the Aztec decal on the lower portions of the interior sides of the nacelles. From my experience in applying the Aztec decals upside down on the lower portion of the saucer, which was doable but a little bit tricky, I decided to go ahead and get these Aztecs down. These surfaces on the nacelles are bulbous and curved and a little bit tricky, and I thought about that it would be extremely difficult to try to get in these really thin, finely shaped Aztec pieces, particularly right along in here where it mounts to the top of the pylon. These are two actual Aztec decals that are very thin, and then this portion right here is curved that wraps around, starting on one side and then wraps around to the other side. So I just went ahead and prevented any hardship and laid those Aztecs down. I know there's probably builders who have done an excellent job in applying these Aztecs after the nacelles are mounted to the pylons. To me, I didn't want to try having to reach over one nacelle down into the well between the two nacelles down into that cavity to try to do this. So I just went ahead and did this this portion of the nacelles. And so now that's done. Now that these are fully dried, it's time to get everything ready and make the final connections of the nacelle wires with the pylon wires to one final lighting test to make sure that everything fires up, and mount the nacelles to the body of the refit Enterprise. So after yet another Saturday dedicated to a long, slow assembly process, the nacelles have been permanently mounted to the tops of the pylons, and assembly for this ship is now complete. All of the wiring is in place, all of the lighting is in place, the nacelles are permanently mounted, and at this point the construction of this ship, of this build, is done. There are a few more areas that require just a little bit of assembly, such as the paragraphics, photo etch pieces that go right here. There is a clear part that will get painted white, and then there's a photo etch piece. It's basically a hatch cover. I believe that this is a cargo hatch here on the port side of the saucer. There's also the hatch covers that go here for the docking points for the travel pods, and there's also some of the same hatch covers that go on the connectors at the back of the little travel pods. But the assembly of this ship is done. So as I mentioned, with the nacelles now in place, the weight distribution has evened out, and this ship no longer lifts forward. The saucer no longer is slightly leaning down, and it is resting perfectly level. Everything is balanced out as it should be right here on this connector point. This is one area that I really have to give props to the original Polar Lights design team who engineered this kit and its base. This is an aspect of this kit that they really got the engineering right. So when making your final wiring connections for your nacelles to the wires that had been patiently waiting coming out of the tops of the pylons, you want to try to make those wiring runs and those connections really as short as possible, because folding the wires into place inside the nacelles, and also as much as you can down into the cavities of the pylons, is very tricky. There's not a lot of space in here. There's really not a lot of space down in these cavities. And the connector point right here is a very small opening, so it's kind of difficult to take those wires and fold them into place. Certainly there's a lot more wires that have to be carefully folded into the front of the secondary hull when you attach the deflector housing. There's also a lot of wires that run down from the saucer, go down through the dorsal. Not as many wires for the nacelles, but then there's not as much space. So what you really want to do is to have some type of surface where you can lay the nacelles on their side as close to the tops of these pylons. So what I did, as you can see here, was use out-of-date Starfleet technical manuals stacked up on either side. So again, would lay each nacelle down on its side, make those connections, solder everything into place, give one last lighting test to make sure everything on the nacelles fired up, then use the heat shrink tubing to really make sure everything is tightly bonded, and then the very slow, meticulous process of slowly placing and folding all the wires into place so that they no longer peek out. Then use regular Testor's styrene model glue to glue everything into place. Then I use two of the larger technical manuals to place on the sides of each of these nacelles to really push them in just a little bit and hold them upright. I didn't want either of them to slightly cant out and maybe permanently cure at an angle. So again, I use large books to push them up just slightly so that they're perfectly straight up. Gave everything about 20 hours to cure, and when I took all the books and the supports away, everything was in place. So all of the lighting connections are in place. And how is everything hooked up and how is everything working? Fantastic. I'm happy to say that all of the lighting systems for this ship are fully functional, fully operational. All of your static window lightings, your spotlights and the forward caps and the nacelles, and the Tenna Controls navigation lights, strobe lights are blinking at the rates that they're supposed to. The Tenna Controls warp sequence system, the circuitry board warp sequence system, is working as it should. And so not only is the ship structurally sound, but all the engineering of the electrical systems are sound as well. So that's a really good feeling. How does everything look when this ship is in the depths of interstellar space? Take a look. So now that the nacelles are in place, now that the structure of the body has been completed, what's next? Chapter 17 will be devoted to the full body Aztec decaling and then the registry marking. At that point, with the registry markers in place, this will fully be the USS Enterprise NCC 1701. Now, I'm not going with any of that alphabet nonsense, any of that Enterprise A, any of that Enterprise B stuff. I've got a pretty good explanation for why, for my feelings about that. You'll hear about that, maybe more than you would like to, in Chapter 17. But for now, after 14 months, the ship is built. All the lights are functioning. This is an incredible feeling. There's been a lot of stress and challenges to reach this stage, but an equal share of little victories that boosted the encouragement and the will to soldier through all the trials. The USS Enterprise 1/350 scale refit is completed. So I'm going to end Chapter 16 on that joyful note. I want to thank everybody who has come with me through this journey and watched all of the preceding chapters through this build. If you have not done so yet, please like and subscribe. There will be some future builds after I've completed the Enterprise. For right now, looking forward to Chapter 17. And what may be the final chapter of the assembly and construction process for the USS Enterprise.